Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kerry. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's special live streaming with our dear friend, Dr. Mohammad Marandi, live from Tehran. Today, we started this a little bit earlier because Sayyid Mohammad Marandi's schedule is fully booked, and I appreciate that he is dedicating his time and energy for us. I'm sure, Dr. Marandi, you are tired. God bless you. I hope you're doing well, first of all.
Thank you. I hope you're doing well too.
We are trying to do well, and we're praying for Iran because I personally believe Iran is a great nation, great civilization, and there is a serious attempt to destabilize Iran from within for the sake of changing a regime or behavioral change, as we have heard several times in different outlets and also from American and Western officials. However, when I see the situation in Iran, I'm seeing the following. I'm seeing there are rioters. Those are supported by different regional and international powers, including the Mossad and the CIA, clearly supporting the rioters in order to cause a rift in the society and also bloodshed. On the other hand, we have the people in also Iran. Those are ordinary people. Those are civilians. They're also calling for reforms. Can we acknowledge the least that there are legitimate demands from the people in Iran, or this is we can only package it in or frame it as an outside plot against Iran?
Well, all countries have people with differing views and differing demands. And of course, a country like Iran, which has public participation, it has democracy, it has elections, governments, candidates, they are all seeking to appeal to ordinary people to get their votes. And when they come to power, they seek to please the people in order to be able to continue doing what it is they're doing. But obviously, many people in Iran are dissatisfied with the current administration, and many people in Iran are satisfied with the current president
Yes.
and the administration and other state branches of the state and other senior figures in the state. But the point is that there is a stark difference between protests and riots and terrorism. We in Iran have regular protests. In fact, on many days, if you drive by parliament, you will see a gathering of people. One day may be school teachers. One day it may be factory workers from a particular area or particular industry or particular factory. One day it could be other segments of civil society. They chant slogans, they demand to see senior figures, and you may see gatherings in front of other ministries or other state institutions. It's not something that, but in Parliament, in front of Parliament, it happens very regularly.
Yes.
When the United States put pressure on the currency, this was initiated, the current events was initiated by a currency drop by 30 to 40% in Iran. I don't know the exact amount. And after that, a few thousand, 2,000, maybe in Tehran. I'm just guessing the numbers. It could be different. I'm not good at numbers or dates at all or names. But in any case, a couple of thousand people in Tehran and let's say a couple of thousand people in a couple of other cities. These business people and shop owners protested because currency devaluation is dangerous for business for a host of reasons. And there were no riots, there were no arrests, there was no police harassment. It's not like in the UK if an 80-year-old Jewish woman holds a placard saying, I oppose genocide, she gets arrested. It's not like in Germany if where a young woman wearing a keffiyeh in solidarity with the Palestinian people, she gets battered. No, they went home. The next day, again, we had protests, probably roughly the same size, more or less, I guess. And then we had the infiltrations. Then suddenly we had these small, very well organized groups come out and behave violently, start destroying public property, and then gradually shooting people, shooting the police. And on Thursday and Friday, it got very bad. And roughly, well, between 300 to 400 police officers, officers of the law, the police, I think roughly 100, but again, it's not precise, and 200 volunteers protecting the streets, the Basij, and some special riot police,
Yes.
and some guards,
Yes.
revolutionary guards. I think it's more than 300, but closer to 300 than 400. Yesterday, there was a huge funeral for 100 of these people in Tehran who were martyred as a result of the riots. So when the West pretends that these are peaceful protesters, they're being very disingenuous. They are insulting the families of these police officers, these Basij members, these guards, these special police, anti-riot police forces that were murdered. And of course, when they're shooting at them, when they're killing them, when they're burning them alive, they burn some of them alive. There are images of these things. They cut
Yes.
their heads off.
I've seen.
And it's not just the police. They attacked they destroyed tens of public buses. They've destroyed tens of fire engines, which are very expensive, and under sanctions, it's very difficult to purchase these things. They burned many ambulances, and they killed a member of the Red Crescent.
Yes.
And they also destroyed a clinic. They burnt a clinic where a young female nurse was trapped inside, and she tried to escape. She went up the stairs, but the fire kept going up, and then when she reached the top floor, it reached her, and she burned alive. So and they also burned, like one example was inside a mosque. They trapped 2 Basij members, and they kept throwing in Molotov cocktails, and they burnt them to death as well.
Yes.
This is what these people are doing. And it's not just the facts on the ground and the footage that shows this. The Israelis and Americans themselves are admitting it. Pompeo, the former head of the CIA, he said that Mossad agents are on the ground. The Mossad itself put out a Persian statement saying that our agents are on the ground.
Today,
Israeli media have said so.
yes,
The
today there
Jerusalem
was
Post said so.
today
And
an Israeli journalist, Tamir Morak, says we reported tonight on Channel 14, foreign actors are arming the protesters in Iran with live firearms, which is the reason for the hundreds of regime personnel killed. Everyone is free to guess who is behind it. This is coming from an Israeli
exactly
journalist.
hundreds of the only it's the Israelis that are a regime, but hundreds of personnel were murdered. Yet the Western media pretends that
Yes.
and the people behind this want to create a narrative to push the United States towards war with Iran. So you see fake progressives like AOC and Levin, one of those horrible, evil, the most evil of the Zionists. They're both saying we should help the Iranian people. So they're creating this consensus in the media, whether it's CNN or Fox News, it doesn't matter, the New York Times or the Washington Post, to attack Iran. So this whole thing was a conspiracy. And then one final point. So one is that the facts show what happened. The footage shows what happened. The admissions prove what the nature of this was. But there's a third thing too. On Friday night, when these rioters were slaughtering and destroying so much property, private property as well, and just killing people on the streets, the Iranian state cut off the internet. So I didn't have internet, and that's why I come here to the studio to speak with you. Now we only have internet, internal internet. We can get Iranian sites, use Iranian apps, but we can't communicate abroad yet. But but there are two reasons for that. Also, it's because of a possible American attack, but well, we can perhaps discuss that later. So they cut the internet, and then within 24 hours, 12 to 24 hours, the whole chaos and the riots, they just collapsed. And since Saturday, and especially Sunday, it's been completely quiet. You can go out at 12 at night, 11 at night, go to restaurants. People in Iran, they go out late. It's a part of our culture, like in other parts of this region. And that shows that this was not spontaneous, and that these people, they were communicating with their leaders abroad, with their bosses abroad, Western intelligence agencies who are coordinating them. And these people actually hate each other. They're different groups. They're the Kurdish terrorists that come from northern Iraq, and the Americans and the Israelis have a very powerful presence there. There's their MEK terrorist organization, which fought against their own country, Iran, for Saddam Hussein in the 1980s. They are involved. There are the monarchists who are involved. And there's also ISIS that's involved.
Yes.
All four of these entities, they've been involved, but they were coordinated from the outside. And as soon as their connection got cut off, it began to die down very rapidly.
Yes.
So it's clear as day. And one final point, and I know I'm speaking in length.
No worries.
But on Monday, we during the later days of the riots, we saw people coming to the streets in protest against the riots, large numbers in different cities. But then on Monday, there was a national day of protest against the rioters and in defense of the Constitution and state institutions and against Western involvement and murder of Iranians through terrorism. Those protests, those rallies, which I'm sure you've seen the images, were massive. In Tehran, between 2.3 to 3 million people participated. And the West ignores this. Western media ignores this, and they had even attempted to say that they did not happen.
They said this was from 2020. I've seen also people on Piers Morgan show saying this is a green screen and all sorts of things. And I think nowadays it's easy to double check and verify if this video was from 2020 or 2026.
Absolutely.
And this is we have the technological means. Also, just to answer to some of the commentators asking about the claims between 12 to 20,000 killed, I would like to say something very clearly about this, that the people who are making these claims have to prove it and not the other way around. If you make a claim that 20,000 people were killed in Iran in the past 2 weeks, I think it's your responsibility to prove it and not the responsibility of Professor Marandi to respond to that claim. However, Professor Marandi...
I would like to respond, and that is these numbers are utterly false. And the numbers are nowhere near it. And in any case, the majority of the people who were killed were the police and innocent bystanders.
Yes.
But what I would like to add is that these people, including Piers Morgan, who was trying to say that these rallies did not happen, there were foreign reporters there from CCTV, CGTN, RT, Turkish reporters, Al Jazeera Arabic, Al Mayadeen, Al Jazeera English. There are all sorts of reporters, and it was being broadcast live on multiple channels throughout the day in Iran.
Yes.
So,
you know my opinion about Al Jazeera, Professor Marandi, and
of course,
the other day when Piers Morgan said that you need foreign media outlets in Iran to report the truth, I was like, we already have Al Jazeera. I think that that is enough for an outlet.
Basically what he is saying is that it has to be us.
Yes, but he doesn't want to come to Iran.
Yes, I invited him twice, and he insulted me on both occasions, saying basically that I will kidnap him and hand him over to the guards. And it's a child. I mean, he is bought off. And I used to, even though he has a very trouble. His past is very checkered, to say the least. But during the Iraq War, he was opposed to the war, and it's very sad to see someone flip this way. And then he brought someone on the show she basically threatened to murder me
Yeah,
and to cut me
ISIS
into
style.
small pieces. Yeah, and that just shows what these people are. These
Yeah.
terrorists, they're the same. And she's allowed to go on television and say that. And by the way, there's a huge Persian language media apparatus in the West
Yes.
that is working against Iran, and they're openly calling for armed rebellion.
Yes.
And I've tweeted footage of one of the hosts of one of these channels, and they're based in London, Iran
Yeah.
International. They can say whatever they want. So
and
the
Iran
West is
International
allowed.
is funded by Saudi Arabia, by the way. I've done some research about it, and they are funded by Saudi Arabia. They are based in the UK. However, Said Mohammad Marandi, you are talking now in your name as I'm proud to call you also a friend, because you treat everyone respectfully, regardless if we agree or disagree on political and geopolitical issues. Therefore, I would like to just ask two questions. Like, personally, you as Professor Mohammad Marandi, do you acknowledge that there is a portion, let's say, in the Iranian society who doesn't want to live under, let's say, an Islamic revolutionary rule, like the one existing since the Islamic Revolution? And secondly, do you acknowledge that there is a grave failure in the media and the press world, let's say, in Iran itself, and also other countries who are targeted by the US empire, when it comes to countering this type of information warfare, especially that always when I see Iran is in the reaction mode. Like, we don't see initiation from Iran in order to present an image of the reality inside Iran, and also to show that we have different opinions inside the country, and this is totally tolerated. Most of the people around the world do not know that there are different opinions in Iran, and they are tolerated.
Yeah, well, I'll answer them separately. First, about whether everyone in Iran is a full supporter of the Islamic Republic of Iran. No, that's not the case. And I don't think that's the case in any country in the world. In Iran, though, there's a high degree of legitimacy of the state. And the Americans do these polling, by the way. They do polling. The State Department, the CIA, they do a lot of polling from Turkey, which is their ally, of course. And they do have these calling centers in Turkey, and they call Iran and get this sort of information. The legitimacy of the state among Iranians has always been high. It goes up and down, but it's always been a strong majority. But the legitimacy of the state and satisfaction with the functioning of the state as a competent entity is something else.
Yes.
So if you ask ordinary Iranians, are you happy with the economy? A very strong majority will say no. Mm-hmm. Are you happy with how the government is running the country? It goes up and down, but during the last few months, and more than the last few months, I don't remember I can't say dates. So it's not good right now.
Yes.
But if you ask Iranians, do you want to change the system? The majority say, we accept the Islamic Republic of Iran in the Constitution. That's one thing. But we even have people in Iran that support Israel.
Yes.
I have a student who argued with me 2 semesters ago in class about Israel, and it was after the genocide began. Most students, of course, and most people dislike Israel immensely, and polls show that clearly. Or you will find people in Iran who, very small numbers, who support the United States, who support Trump. They exist, and they're open about it. If you go, I was just speaking to a relative of mine 2-3 hours ago, and an elderly figure, and he was in the park, and he had this argument with someone who was saying, no, Trump is good. And the other old men in the park were arguing with him and saying, you're a madman. Or these exist. So and in Iran, we have different political parties. I mean, sometimes the West acknowledges it, and sometimes they don't. So, for example, they say Pezeshkian is a reformist and he's opposed to the regime. They were even saying that Pezeshkian may be secretly supporting the rioters. And So which is it? Which is it? Is it a monolithic dictatorship which is suppressing the people, or is there diversity of views in the parliament and in civil society? We have websites, newspapers, telegram channels, and others that speak against the government, that support the government, that speak out against the leader, usually not in a very insulting way, but they'll criticize him openly. The former president, as we speak, has been criticizing the leader indirectly and for a very long period of time. So that is basically Western propaganda. You can go in Iran, if you come to Iran today, sit in a taxi and ask him, what do you think? The guy may curse the government. He may curse God.
This is where people get their political polling, by the way. Secret services, this is an example I would like to give you guys also. When I used to study in Lebanon, master in political science, the USAID used to hire students from our university, send them to Tripoli, and just talk to the taxi drivers and ask them simple questions about political issues, record it, and then document it. They don't need a CIA asset in Tripoli, for example. What they need basically is a student, give him $800 per month, and this guy is talking to taxi drivers, and then they know the public opinion in the country. You mentioned Pezeshkian. I'm not a big fan of him.
But just one thing that I would like to add,
please.
And that is that you can get in a taxi, and the guy will be cursing the government and be angry about inflation and how he can't find or the spare parts for his car are expensive, or he can't find them, or they're fake. But many of these very same people are the ones who went and protested against the rioters in defense of the state. It does not mean that all these people who go there, they all think the same. Yes. No, they're very diverse in views. But they say, look, this constitution, we protect it. We believe in it. This country is full of flaws. There's corruption, incompetence, but we want this. And it's none of your business, Mr. Trump or Mr. Biden or Mr. Obama, about what goes on inside our country. And of course, Obama, Biden, and Trump don't care about the needs of the Iranian people. Otherwise, they would have sanctioned them. They wouldn't try to strangle the people of Iran or Venezuela or Cuba or Syria or Nicaragua or Yemen. They want to harm people. That's the objective. They destroy countries, especially in our part of the world, where they want to make sure that the Israeli regime in future can reign supreme. They want a fragmented region. So they want Iranians to suffer. But these people on the streets of Tehran, yes, there is a strong consensus about the constitution and about preserving state institutions and the state. But they have different political affiliations. Some of them may not even vote. Some of them may vote for one guy. Someone may vote for another person. There's a lot of diversity in the country. But in the West, they try to pretend as if, and I don't want to be insulting to North Koreans, but how North Korea is depicted. Yes. They want to depict Iran is more open than any of the countries in this region.
Professor Marandi, do you acknowledge the fact that...
And by the way,
yes,
when we look at what's happening in the West, especially after Gaza, it's much more open than in the West.
Yeah. Do you acknowledge, Professor Marandi, that after October 7, Iran retreated in the region and the axis of resistance which Iran has built for 40 years has crumbled, especially after the decapitation of the leadership of Hezbollah, the decimation of Gaza, and let's say, stealing Syria and carving up between Turkey and Israel? And if that is the case, people are arguing that this is a natural consequence of Iran retreating from the front lines against their enemy, and namely Israel in this case, and therefore the conflict has reached to the borders of Iran because of this retreat. And if Iran retreated from these files, many people also asking, and you see, you're present online, and people are like calling for Iran to acquire a nuke in this case. And the official position is it is haram to acquire a nuke, and it is a weapon that could cause enormous harm to innocent people as well. However, many people also and observers point to the fact that if you develop a nuke, you don't necessarily use it, but this is a deterrent weapon. And one of the countries which proved that this is basically working is North Korea in this case. Nobody thinks about regime change in North Korea. Nobody thinks about sending firearms to North Korea because they have nuke. So what do you say about Iran retreating? And if they retreated in the region and have axis of resistance has failed, let's say, and we don't say they tried to do something noble in the eyes of many people, but they failed. Like, can we acknowledge that? And secondly, do you think that if there is serious existential threat against Iran, Iran would change its nuclear doctrine, or should?
Well, first, while you're speaking, I was listening, but I was also trying to remember what your second question was, because you asked me two questions and I finished answering the first, and then you added a third question. So I don't remember what it was. If any of your viewers and listeners remember, then they can remind us, and after this, I'll go back to that. But or if you remember yourself, then you can remind me later. I don't believe that the axis of resistance has retreated, or Iran has retreated. In war, you have all sorts of things happening, and when two sides are fighting, both sides are weakened. There's no doubt about that. The Russians have been fighting in Ukraine for 4 years. The Russians are winning the war, but have the Russians been weakened? Of course they have. I mean, everyone's weakened, because the West has been weakened, because it's like two boxers in a ring when they're boxing. At the end, one side wins, the other side loses, unless there's gambling and there's cheating going on. But but that aside, both are tired. In this 2 year and 3 month, let's say, because the genocide hasn't stopped. You know this, and every day they're murdering people in Gaza, and in Lebanon they're murdering people. In the West Bank, they're ethnically cleansing the population. So, we should always remember what's going on in Gaza, in Lebanon, West Bank. So it's ongoing. Hamas of course, has been fighting. The Israelis have taken over half of Gaza, or in Lebanon, there's a ceasefire, and Hezbollah has had many martyrs. There's no doubt about that. In Syria, of course, as you pointed out, this conspiracy that was going on for decades, literally, but especially since 2011, Erdogan, King Hussein of Jordan, and King Abdullah of Jordan, and the regimes in the Persian Gulf, especially Qatar, they were working with the United States and NATO to undermine Syria. There's no doubt about that. Some of them, were more prominent, like Qatar. Some less so. Some pulled back a bit later. But it was clear that these Takfiri groups, we know, you've gone over this a 1,000 times, and I don't want to bother your viewers, but I don't want to go into the Jake Sullivan email. I don't want to go in the 2012 U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency document. But just two things I do want to remind your viewers, because it's spoken of less. And one is Kerry, in his leaked audio at the UN, when he told the so-called Syrian activists that we allowed ISIS to advance on Damascus to put pressure on the government.
True.
And also, when ISIS was taking over Iraq, Obama refused to help the Iraqi government, and even refused to help the Kurdish regional government to defend themselves. And Erbil was saved because the Iranians intervened. And Baghdad was saved because the Iranians intervened, and then the popular mobilization forces were created, and the Iraqi army was strengthened, and then they pushed back and all that. So the United States, this was a grand conspiracy to bring down Syria. But I don't think even that is going. I don't believe that Syria is going well for Turkey at all. Turkey has made under Erdogan. It's his fault. Under Erdogan, he has destroyed Syria, killed many hundreds of thousands of people alongside the rest of these conspirators. But what he has also done is that he has destroyed the wall or barrier between Turkey and Israel. And in any conflict between Turkey and Israel, Trump is going to side with Israel, not Turkey. So Erdogan is in a difficult position. And now we say how the Israeli regime is aligning with the Greeks and in Cyprus, which is, I think, despicable of the Greeks and this anyone who aligns itself with the Israeli regime is despicable. But in any case, Erdogan has brought this upon himself. But in any case, the victory that the axis of resistance has achieved, and you may disagree with me here, is that they held their ground on most fronts. They remain undefeated, even though the enemy is far more powerful and has enormous support from the West. But most importantly, the Israeli regime, during the last 2 years and 3 months, has delegitimized itself in the eyes of the world in a way in which I could never have imagined happening in my life. I never thought that I would see the day when young people across the United States and across Europe, when I'm having a conversation on a Western media outlet, that the comments and that the reaction is so positive. And so many young people, Jews, Christians, Muslims, Hindus, are so eloquent in their opposition to Zionism and their opposition to ethno-supremacism that I feel that it's time for me to retire because they're so much better than me. I never thought I'd see that day. And I think if the Israeli regime is to collapse, and it will ultimately collapse, this is what is the important thing. This needs to happen. Zionism has to be exposed. So do you call that a victory or defeat? I call it a victory, a victory that comes at a very heavy price. Because each of these wonderful people who were martyred, especially the Lebanese, they sacrificed themselves, Hezbollah, and their families. They sacrificed themselves for another people. Hamas, Islamic Jihad, the Palestinian people, civil society, all those who resisted, women, men, children, all those who resisted in Gaza, they're heroes. But there's a special place in heaven for people who sacrifice for others. And that's what Hezbollah did. That's what Ansarullah did. But Hezbollah was, right next door. And so it was very painful for them. But that is the highest principle, I think, on this planet, for someone to sacrifice himself or herself for someone else. But also you can look at it, and you can just one final point. Just one final point. And that is that on two fronts, on three fronts, we can argue about whether Hezbollah is stronger today than it was 2 years ago or not, or Syria, or what the situation is there can be discussed. In Palestine, we can discuss whether the resistance is stronger or weaker. That is all open to. But there are two fronts where the resistance is stronger today. One is in Yemen, and the other is in Iraq. And you know as well as I, because you cover these things, the elections in Iraq, despite the fact that the United States and its allies spent a lot of money, they failed. And the supporters of the resistance in this new parliament are stronger, significantly stronger than they were in the previous parliament.
Professor Marandi, some people see this region now differently after the regime change in Syria, and they see that Turkey has moved on the chessboard clearly. They kicked the Iranian influence out of Syria. And what Turkey is also, Turkey, they like to call it Turkey nowadays under Erdogan, is doing basically also what Israel has tried to do in Gaza. Like they are ethnically cleansing indigenous people on the borders. They are coming after the Kurds. They're sending the proxies of Jolani into Sweda, and they have committed massacres in broad daylight against the Druze, against the Alawites. Tens of thousands of people perished during this time, and there is a complete media blackout about it. So people also terrified about Turkey's imperialist aspirations in the region, one of which is in Cyprus and in Greece. And similarly, nowadays people say that Iran should feel threatened by Turkey because Turkey nowadays, as the biggest army in NATO, is projecting NATO hegemony through the corridors of Zangezur that they're trying to open, and also via the occupation of Nagorno-Karabakh by Azerbaijan, which was backed directly by Turkey. And now the Israelis are building smart villages on the borders with Iran, where the Azeris recently occupied. Do you think that sooner or later Iran will or should shift its energy toward an imminent geopolitical challenge coming from Turkey, in contrast to Israel, which is geographically far away from Iran? And this is where people come and say, now Trump is going to offer Iran a different role in the region. They don't want regime change in Iran. What they want is behavioral change. And this behavioral change is that Iran, they want for the state to stay, and they want for Iran not to be balkanized and destroyed and complete chaos in the region. But Iran has to change its nature, its character, into more nationalist country and a counter way to Turkey, because the United States as the empire do not like to see any dominant player in the region, and therefore Iran could be needed in this task for the future. So first things first, do you see Turkey as a geopolitical challenge the same way Greece and Cyprus sees? That's why they're aligning themselves with Israel. And secondly, do you think that Trump would attack Iran, or they're trying to exert maximum pressure for this type of Venezuela type of change in your country?
Your questions are sort of like one of these IQ tests. Like you ask 50 things, and I have to remember, like, all the different things that you said.
Two questions in summary. I will summarize it.
No, let me go on, because if you continue, it'll just, all of it will melt. Just it'll disappear from my memory. Turkey, if you've noticed in my tweets and in my conversations, when I speak, I always say that Qatar is a U.S. proxy, which it is. The Emirates is a U.S. proxy, which it is. They don't like each other, but they're both U.S. proxies. Neither of them. Qatar has no concern for the Palestinian people. No. They have this verbal concern. They give scholarships so that people from civil society in Palestine will feel indebted to them. Smart move, but it's not based on principle. Al Jazeera talks, but they don't do anything. Even hosting Hamas, as you know, is because the Americans and the Israelis asked them to do it. But when I speak about Turkey and I speak about what I dislike, I say Erdogan, because Erdogan is not Turkey. Turkey is a very, very sophisticated society with very diverse people. Very many cultured people, very sincere in their support for the Palestinian people. Many, even from Erdogan's party, very upset with the fact that he and his team are so cooperative with Netanyahu, and have been providing Netanyahu with oil to use for the genocide for over 2 years, doing trade with Netanyahu. You recall an MP was protesting, and he was so upset that he had a heart attack during his speech in parliament and died. It was so upsetting to him what Erdogan was doing. So the betrayal of Erdogan towards the Palestinian cause and his betrayal to Syria is something that I believe cannot be forgiven. And he had a closer relationship with the Syrian president, former President Assad, than Iran ever did. They would vacation together. They would go with their families and vacation together. Iran never did that.
Yeah,
they had much more trade. They were close. Iran only had a good relationship, and they cooperated in Lebanon together and over the resistance. But beyond that, the relationship was nowhere near as personal and friendly as between Erdogan and former President Assad. Turkey is not a country that I think Iranians fear at all. Uh, in the Erdogan, though, is someone that the Iranians are very cautious about. I don't believe that he's succeeded in Syria. You've probably heard that his government is trying to communicate with Iran and he wants to visit Iran. Why? Because he feels the pressure, because he knows that in any conflict with the Israeli regime, he would be defeated because his economy is so deeply bound to the West. He's not independent. Turkey is very vulnerable. It has a huge debt. And just one example was when that pastor was arrested after the coup, and they said that he was involved in the coup, the US pastor, who was during the Trump's first term. When Trump threatened Turkey with sanctions, Erdogan bent the knee and handed him over, even though the person was convicted in court. Now, whether he was guilty or not, I have no idea. I've never followed the case. But the point is that he kneeled. And recently in Egypt, when we had that clown show in where foreign leaders came over Gaza and Trump behaved like the fool that he is, Trump said to Erdogan that he was all my good friend. He was always there when I needed him. Erdogan put his hand on his chest. You know what that means in our societies. How that I'm we're close, we're friends. You're my brother. So I have no respect for such people, without a doubt. But he is not Turkey. Many people in Turkey are not happy with what's happened in Syria. And you can see that when you go to Turkey, you can see when you speak with people. Actually, sadly, it's caused a lot of racism, which I'm sure you are aware of in Turkey, and tension between the different communities. And the situation in Syria is not going to get better, and it is not getting better. So ultimately, I don't think that this Al Qaeda regime is going to survive, and I don't think Erdogan is going to be able to have his cake. And the same is true in the Caucasus. If they want to take southern Armenia, there will be war.
Hmm.
It's as simple as that. The Iranians have said very openly that if the road between the Armenian capital and the Iranian capital is blocked to the Iranians, there will be war.
And the war is going
Simple
to
as
be
that.
against who?
Whoever blocks it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Final
whoever blocks
question, Professor Marandi. You are going to leave very soon because you have commitments. Is this pressure by the United States and the hysteria surrounding about Iran aimed at a behavior change in Iran or regime change in your speculation?
I have no doubt that the United States would like to see Iran balkanized, because US policy in our region is always Israeli policy. Anyone who thinks that there's any sharp difference is a fool. And those people in Syria who or outside of Syria who were supporting regime change in Syria alongside the CIA and the United States and the West, they were working for the interests of the Israeli regime. And many of these people, some of these people I know, I can name right now. I don't want to name them because it's not worth it, right? But in any case, we know who they are. They were also, many of them were supporters of Palestine, deeply sectarian, deeply because they've been fed by the Qataris and the Saudis and sectarian people throughout the Persian Gulf region. These despotic regimes, the ideology of Qatar is Wahhabism. The
Yes.
main mosque in Qatar is the Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab mosque. The same is true in Saudi Arabia. It's
Yeah.
Wahhabism. Of course, Mohammed bin Salman, to his, whether we like him or not, to his credit, he has distanced himself from this ideology, which is a good thing. I think it's a very good thing. But I'm not saying that his government is good or bad, or that's another issue altogether. But I want to say that he is not playing the role that his predecessors were.
Yes.
From the evidence that we have. But Qatar is funding these extremists. But throughout the years, Saudi Arabia was involved. That's in the past, they were also deeply involved. So many of these people have been on the payroll. for many years, many mosques, centers, media outlets. You know those media outlets. There are many, you know Arabic, many hundreds of TV channels, many of them very evil and sectarian, full of hate, and it sort of died down in recent years. But when they were trying to overthrow the Syrian government, it was, it was very open, very blatant, very ugly, and it was being funded. So these people were working alongside the CIA and Western intelligence, and basically they were working with Israelis. There's in West Asia, there's no area where U.S. interests and the U.S. would do one thing or anything significant that would not be in the interest of the Israeli regime, because the United States is dominated by Zionists. Zionism. Some people say, is it the United States that controls Israel, or is it Israel that controls the United States? It is Zionism that controls the policies of both. So that is what they want. And Iran, but in any case, the United States is going to fail. And Iran is not going to, what is the word in English? Iran is not going to
succumb to the pressure.
No. Iran is not going to halt or seize or forsake. Sorry, my English is not that good, actually. But
Your
Iran
English
is not going
perfect.
Iran is not going to forsake the Palestinian people. That is not going to.
Professor Marandi, after this crisis fades down and you have more time, I would like to have you on a longer conversation with you, because today as you saw, I packed the questions, as you said, in an AI style, pushing lots of questions on you, because
I didn't even answer one of the long questions, because one of those, you said there are two questions, and then I answered the first. I don't even remember
I
what
have a lot of questions. I hope that next time we would sit like face to face in a podcast setup and talk for hours, because people deserve.
Inshallah, visit Iran and we can do that.
People deserve answers, and I believe you're a very, very smart person, and you're a very eloquent person, and God bless you for what you do. I'm sure you're very tired already, and you have lots of other commitments. So thank you so much for your energy and for putting lots of energy in this and dedicating your time, Professor Marandi. Guys, go and also hit him a follow on X. You agree or disagree? I saw lots of comments, people agreeing and disagreeing, and this is healthy. What we're doing here is bringing you different perspectives from Iran and outside Iran. So peace be upon you guys, and peace be upon you, Professor Marandi, and I will see you guys tomorrow again on Cold War 2.0. Okay? Salam.
Great pleasure.